Don't follow me, Hyunjin. Felix said it so quietly that Hyunjin almost thought the words had been swallowed by the rain. Then Felix pushed through the studio's back door and disappeared into the darkness. Hyunjin froze. Behind him, the rehearsal room was still alive with noise. Someone was laughing near the speakers. Chairs scraped against the floor. Bang Chan was talking about tomorrow's schedule while Changbin complained about being hungry again. But none of it reached Hyunjin anymore. His eyes remained fixed on the door Felix had just gone through. Something was wrong. Not ordinary wrong. Not the kind of tiredness. Felix sometimes hid behind a bright smile after a long rehearsal. This was different. For the past 3 hours, Felix had barely spoken. He had smiled when the others joked, nodded whenever Bang Chan gave instructions, and even laughed at something Hon had said. But every few minutes, his fingers had slipped into the pocket of his jacket, touching something hidden there. Hyunjin had noticed. He always noticed things about Felix that other people overlooked. The way Felix rubbed his thumb against the edge of his phone when nervous, the way his shoulders became unusually still when he was trying not to cry, the way his smile became brighter whenever he wanted people to stop asking questions. Tonight, all three had happened. Hyunjin grabbed his jacket. "Where are you going?" Bang Chan asked. Hyunjin hesitated. "I'll be back." Hyunjin. He turned. Bang Chan was watching him carefully now. Hyunjin forced a small smile. "I just need some air." Bang Chan studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Don't stay out too long." Hyunjin left before anyone could ask another question. The cold hit him immediately. Rain had been falling for almost an hour, turning the pavement behind the building into a mirror of distorted lights. The air smelled of wet concrete and metal. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed with tires hissing against the road. Hyunjin pulled his hood over his head. "Felix." No answer. He stepped forward. The alley was almost empty. Almost. At the far end, beneath a broken street lamp, Felix was standing with his back toward the building. He wasn't alone. A figure stood several meters in front of him. Tall, dressed in a dark coat, face hidden beneath an umbrella. Hyunjin stopped breathing for a second. He couldn't hear what they were saying. The rain was too loud. Felix seemed tense, his arms hanging stiffly at his sides. The stranger said something. Felix shook his head. Then the stranger reached inside the coat. Hyunjin's heart slammed against his ribs. He took one step forward. Felix suddenly looked over his shoulder. Their eyes met. For one terrible second, neither moved. Felix's expression changed immediately. Fear. Real fear. Not surprise. Not embarrassment. Fear. Hyunjin started toward him. Felix shook his head violently. No. Even from that distance.
Hyunjin understood. "Stop. Don't come closer." But Hyunjin had never been good at walking away from Felix. He took another step. The stranger turned. The street lamp flickered. For a fraction of a second, Hyunjin saw the person's face. A man, older than them, pale. His expression was impossible to read. Then he lowered the umbrella, turned around, and walked toward the street. Felix didn't follow. Hyunjin reached him moments later. "What was that?" Felix stared at the wet pavement. "Nothing." "Don't do that." Felix swallowed. "Do what?" "Smile and pretend nothing happened." Felix looked up. There was no smile this time. "Hyunjin, please." "Who was he?" "I don't know." "You don't know him." Felix remained silent. Hyunjin stepped closer. "You were scared." "I wasn't." "You were." Felix looked away. Rainwater rolled from his hair down the side of his face. Hyunjin suddenly noticed that Felix's hands were trembling. Without thinking, he caught one of them. Felix flinched. "Your hand is freezing." "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." "Because I am." "No, you're not." The words came out harsher than Hyunjin intended. Felix pulled his hand away. For several seconds they stood beneath the rain without speaking. Then Felix whispered, "You shouldn't have followed me." "Why?" "Because now you're involved." Hyunjin's stomach tightened. "Involved in what?" Felix closed his eyes. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Something deeper. Something that had been eating away at him for much longer than one night. "I can't tell you." "Why?" "Because if I tell you, you'll try to help me." Hyunjin stared at him. "Of course I will." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." A car turned into the street. Its headlights briefly illuminated the alley. Felix instinctively stepped closer to Hyunjin. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Felix whispered, "Someone has been watching me." Hyunjin's expression hardened. "How long?" "I don't know." "Days." Felix shook his head. Weeks. Hyunjin felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the rain. Why didn't you tell Chan? Because I don't know who they are. Then tell the police. Felix looked at him. I don't have proof. You don't need to handle this alone. I know. Then why are you? Felix's eyes filled with something Hyunjin couldn't name. Shame, fear, maybe both. Because I'm afraid that if I tell everyone, something worse will happen. Hyunjin didn't answer. Felix looked toward the street where the stranger had disappeared. He didn't come here to threaten me. Then why? Felix slowly reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers closed around something. He hesitated. Then he pulled out a small black envelope. It was wet around the edges. Hyunjin stared at it. What is that? Felix handed it to him. That's why I refused to go home with everyone. Hyunjin took the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. There was no name. Written on the front, no address, only a single symbol drawn in silver ink, a circle divided by a thin vertical line. Hyunjin looked at Felix. What does this mean? I don't know. You've received this before? Felix didn't answer. Hyunjin's eyes widened. How many times? 3. Felix. I didn't open the first 2. And this one? Felix's voice dropped to a whisper. This one had your name inside. Hyunjin felt the world become strangely quiet. What? Felix looked directly at him. Your name? Hyunjin opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. His fingers stopped. It was a picture of him, taken from a distance. He was walking outside the company building. The photograph had been taken only 2 days earlier. On the back, someone had written 4 words. You were never the target. Hyunjin stared at the sentence. What does this mean? Felix shook his head. I don't know. Then why does this have my picture? I told you. What? I'm not the target. Felix's voice trembled. You are. The rain seemed to grow louder. Hyunjin looked at the photograph again. For the first time, he noticed something in the background. A familiar building, a familiar black car, and someone standing behind him. Someone Hyunjin had never noticed when the photograph was taken. His blood ran cold. Felix? What? Hyunjin turned the photograph around. There is someone else in this picture. Felix looked. His face went pale. Because the person standing behind Hyunjin wasn't the stranger from the alley. It was someone they both knew. Someone who had been inside the building with them all evening. Someone who had smiled at Felix only minutes earlier. Felix slowly whispered the name. And suddenly, neither of them felt safe going back inside. Felix stared at the photograph until the paper began to tremble between his fingers. Hyunjin, he whispered, we need to leave. Hyunjin didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the familiar face captured in the background. It was Seungmin, standing several meters behind him, watching. But the photograph had been taken 2 days ago. And Seungmin had told them he hadn't been near the building that evening. Maybe it's not him, Hyunjin said. Felix looked at him. You know it is. We can't accuse someone because of a photograph. I know. Then why are you shaking? Felix looked down. His fingers were trembling again. I've seen him before. Hyunjin's expression changed. Where? Outside my apartment. The words landed heavily. Felix continued before Hyunjin could respond. 3 nights ago, I saw him standing across the street. I thought he was waiting for someone. And you didn't tell anyone? I didn't know what to think. Felix? I was scared. That confession silenced Hyunjin. Felix rarely admitted fear. He usually buried it beneath laughter, jokes, and that impossibly bright smile that made everyone believe he was fine.
But tonight, there was nowhere left for him to hide. A sound came from behind them. Both turned. The back door of the building had opened. Someone stepped into the alley. Hyunjin instinctively moved in front of Felix. Who's there? The figure stopped. It was Seungmin. He looked surprised to see them. What are you two doing out here? Neither Felix nor Hyunjin answered. Seungmin glanced between them. Then his eyes dropped to the photograph in Hyunjin's hand. His expression changed, only for a second, but Hyunjin saw it. You recognize it, Hyunjin said. Seungmin became still. Where did you get that? Felix stepped forward. Why were you behind Hyunjin? Seungmin looked at Felix. I wasn't. You're in the picture. I know. Hyunjin's voice hardened. Then explain. Seungmin looked toward the street. Rain dripped from his hair. I can't. Felix's breathing became uneven. Can't? Not here. Then where? Seungmin looked back at them. Because if the person who sent that photograph knows you found it, they will know you understand what it means. Hyunjin tightened his grip on the photograph. What does it mean? Seungmin didn't answer. Instead, he walked closer. I need you to trust me. Hyunjin almost laughed. That's a difficult request right now. I know. Then give me one reason. Seungmin stared at Felix. Because I've been trying to keep him safe. Felix froze. What? Seungmin looked down. I should have told you earlier. Told me what? Seungmin took a breath. The person watching you isn't interested in hurting you. Hyunjin frowned. Then what do they want? Seungmin's eyes moved toward him. They want you to remember something. Hyunjin felt his stomach tighten. Remember what? Seungmin's voice dropped. A night you don't remember. The alley seemed to shrink around them. Felix looked at Hyunjin. Hyunjin stared back. What are you talking about? Seungmin hesitated. 2 years ago. Hyunjin's face changed. I don't understand. You will. Stop talking like that. Seungmin pulled a small key from his pocket. There's a storage room underneath the old practice building. Felix looked at the key. What is that? Something that belonged to someone who disappeared. Hyunjin's eyes narrowed. Who? Seungmin looked at Felix. Then at Hyunjin. Someone who knew both of you. A distant siren echoed through the city. Seungmin stepped backward. You can't stay here. Why? Because they're already watching. Hyunjin looked around. The alley was empty. But suddenly every dark window seemed like an eye. Every parked car felt suspicious. Every distant silhouette looked like someone waiting. Felix grabbed Hyunjin's sleeve. Let's go. Hyunjin looked at him. Where? Anywhere that isn't here. They hurried back toward the building. But before Felix opened the door, his phone vibrated. Once, twice, then again. He pulled it out. A message.
Appeared on the screen. You should have gone home with the others. Felix stopped breathing. Another message arrived. Now Hyunjin knows too much. His hands went numb. Hyunjin saw the screen. Felix. A final message appeared. Ask Seungmin what happened that night. Felix slowly looked toward the alley. Seungmin was gone. Only the rain remained. And somewhere beyond the darkness, a car engine started. Hyunjin looked at Felix. What night? Felix couldn't answer. Because deep inside his mind, something had begun to surface. A room, a locked door, a voice calling his name, and Hyunjin standing beside him. Then darkness. Nothing else. Felix closed his eyes. I think... His voice broke. I think I remember. I remember the door. Felix's voice was barely audible. Hyunjin stood beside him, afraid to interrupt. Rain continued to fall outside the building, but neither of them noticed it anymore. What door? Hyunjin asked. Felix pressed his fingers against his temple. The old practice building. Seungmin had been right. 2 years ago, Felix and Hyunjin had been there late at night after a rehearsal. Something had happened that neither of them could remember clearly. But now the pieces were returning. A corridor, a flickering light, a locked storage room, a voice arguing with someone, and then Hyunjin shouting his name. Felix suddenly grabbed Hyunjin's wrist. You were there. Hyunjin nodded slowly. I think I was. You tried to open the door. And you told me to leave. Felix's eyes widened. I did? You said someone was inside. Silence filled the room. Then another memory surfaced. A young man standing in front of them, terrified, begging them not to tell anyone what they had seen. Felix's breathing became unsteady. Who was he? Hyunjin closed his eyes. I don't know. The door opened behind them. Seungmin returned. He looked exhausted. I do. Felix turned. Then tell us. Seungmin stared at them for several seconds before finally speaking. His name was Minjae. Felix's expression changed. He worked with the company temporarily. He discovered that someone had been stealing private information from people around the group. Hyunjin's jaw tightened. And he disappeared? Seungmin nodded. He tried to expose it. Someone threatened him. That night, he came to the old building because he thought it was the only place nobody would look for him. Felix remembered the frightened face, the shaking hands, the desperate voice. He asked us for help. Yes, Seungmin said. Felix's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't we remember? Because you were both told to forget. Hyunjin looked at him. By whom? Seungmin lowered his gaze. I don't know. But you knew all this. I found out later. Then why didn't you tell us? Because I was afraid. That answer silenced them. Seungmin pulled the black envelope from his coat and placed it on the table. The person sending these photographs isn't trying to hurt you. Felix stared at him. They're trying to make you remember. Hyunjin slowly opened the envelope. Inside was another photograph. This one showed 3 people standing outside the old practice building. Felix, Hyunjin, and Min-jae. On the back was a handwritten sentence. Some memories hurt because they were never meant to disappear. Felix stared at the photograph. Then he remembered everything. Min-jae had not disappeared because of them. He had escaped. They had helped him that night. Hyunjin had found a way out through the rear entrance while Felix distracted the person searching for him. They had promised to keep quiet until Min-jae was safe. But afterward, someone had convinced them that the entire incident had never happened. The memory had been buried beneath fear, exhaustion, and time. Felix looked at Hyunjin. I thought I abandoned him. You didn't. I spent 2 years thinking I did. Hyunjin stepped closer. You were protecting him. Felix finally broke down. Hyunjin pulled him into a quiet embrace. For the first time that night, Felix stopped pretending to be strong. Seungmin turned toward the window. He contacted me last month. Felix lifted his head. Min-jae? Seungmin nodded. He's alive. Felix stared at him. Where is he? Seungmin smiled faintly. Safe. The tension that had followed them for weeks finally began to loosen, not disappear. Some questions remained unanswered. Who had originally threatened Min-jae? Who had erased their memories? And why had the photographs started appearing now? But Felix no longer felt trapped by those questions. He understood something more important. He had spent years believing that fear meant he had failed. It didn't. Sometimes fear simply meant that something mattered deeply enough to protect. Hyunjin picked up the final photograph. So that's why you refused to go home with us? Felix nodded. I was afraid someone was waiting for me. Hyunjin smiled. They were. Felix looked at him. But it wasn't the person you thought. Outside, the rain finally began to fade. The city lights reflected across the wet pavement, turning the darkness into something softer. Felix looked through the window. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel watched. He felt free. Hyunjin stood beside him. You don't have to hide things from us anymore. Felix smiled. I know. And this time, the smile was real. They walked out of the building together. No stranger waited beneath the street lamp. No mysterious car followed them. Only the quiet city remained. Yet as Felix reached for the door of the waiting van, he stopped. Something caught his attention on the pavement. A small black envelope. His smile disappeared. Hyunjin noticed. What is it? Felix slowly picked it up. There was no symbol this time. No photograph. Only 6 handwritten words. Thank you for remembering me, Felix. Felix stared.